Picture this. You're in a meeting. You make a small mistake, you feel that squeeze of guilt in your chest. So you do what you were trained to do. I'm really sorry, that was my fault. I should have been more careful. You think you're being mature. You think you're showing responsibility. But watch the room. Watch how the energy shifts the second those words leave your mouth. Eyes drop. A few people look away. One person writes something down. Someone else suddenly looks a little taller in their chair. Respect just moved. Leverage just moved. And it did not move in your direction. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. You didn't just apologize. You quietly announced your weakness. You just told everyone in that room exactly where to hit you next time. Your guilt, your fear of being disliked, your need to be seen as good. Have you ever noticed how, after a big apology, people bring your mistake up more, not less? They joke about it. They reference it in passing. They use it to question your judgment in future decisions. That's not an accident. That's how power works when you don't understand the game. Here's the harsh reality. You were trained to apologize in a way that makes you easy to control. Too much emotion, too much explanation, too much visibility into your mind. You think you're being honest, but you are handing people the blueprint to your insecurity and your behavior under pressure. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. In The Prince, he didn't care if a ruler was actually virtuous. He cared that they appeared strong, controlled, unshakable, especially when they made mistakes. A feared man lives safer than a loved one, not because he never fails, but because he never bleeds in public when he does. When you over-confess, when you pour out your guilt, when you stand there explaining why you messed up, you are not healing the situation. You are volunteering for psychological blackmail. You are teaching people that if they press you with disappointment, you will fold, talk, and beg for their approval. Pay attention. Every extra detail you add to your apology is another weapon in someone else's hands. Every nervous laugh, every "I just feel so bad," every "I hope you're not mad at me," tells them exactly how to control your emotion next time. Trust me, powerful people make mistakes all the time. The difference is, they don't turn those moments into self-humiliation rituals. They accept responsibility without bending their spine. They repair damage without groveling. They shift the focus from their personal shame to clear, decisive action. This video is going to show you how to do the same, how to own what you did without collapsing, how to use silence, framing, and firm boundaries so people secretly fear disappointing you, instead of circling you like sharks the moment you slip. Because the problem isn't that you say sorry, it's how you say it. And once you see that, you will never apologize the same way again. Because the problem isn't that you say sorry, it's how you say it. And once you see that, you will never apologize the same way again. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. You are not naturally weak. You are not born to kneel. You were trained to. Trained by teachers, parents, and culture to believe that being a good person means throwing yourself on the floor every time you slip, confessing every emotion, over-explaining every mistake until your dignity is gone. Have you ever noticed how the people most obsessed with being seen as nice are the ones nobody really respects? That's not an accident. From school, you were rewarded for self-blame. Say you're sorry. Louder, look them in the eye. Admit it was all your fault. You were conditioned to perform guilt as a ritual, not to fix the problem, but to make everyone else feel powerful over you. Here's the harsh reality. The training followed you into adulthood. Now, when you get something wrong, you don't just correct it, you collapse. Too much emotion, too much honesty, too much visibility into your mind. You think you're being moral, you think you're being mature. But you are broadcasting one message: if you ever want control over me, just make me feel guilty. Machiavelli understood this game centuries ago. He said it is safer to be feared than loved. You hear that and picture violence, cruelty, chaos. Wrong in real power dynamics. Feared means people feel a psychological distance from you. They know you don't crumble. They know your composure doesn't crack, even when you're wrong. That distance creates an aura, cross you, and they will feel it. Pay attention here, because this is where your rank is decided. People don't study you when everything is smooth. They study you when you're exposed. When you're called out in a meeting. When you miss a deadline. When you hurt someone unintentionally. That's when they zoom in on your behavior. Do you beg? Do you over-explain? Do you emotionally bleed all over the floor? Or do you stay calm, precise, and controlled? Picture this: a CEO's product launch fails. Public embarrassment, cameras, headlines, pressure. The weak response? A tearful, rambling apology about how terrible they feel. The powerful response? One sentence acknowledging the failure, then a clear 90-day plan and a firm tone. Same mistake. Completely different rank. Most people, the second they feel guilt, spill everything. They confess every thought, every insecurity, every fear. They hand over the blueprint to their mind. Powerful people do the opposite. They stay measured, selective, strategic. They can admit fault without surrendering control of the frame. Trust me, this is the core of it. The way you handle your mistakes is a signal. Either I can be controlled through guilt, or even when I'm wrong, you don't move me. Right now, most of your behavior screams the first one. And that terrifies you more than it terrifies them. In the next part, you're going to learn how to flip that signal so your apologies stop weakening you and start raising your status. So here's where it gets darker. You think you're just being honest about your mistakes. You think you're just being a good person. But every time you crumble, someone is quietly taking notes. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. People are running silent experiments on you. They watch what happens when you mess up. Do you panic? Do you start talking faster, over-explaining every detail? Do your eyes water, your voice shake, your shoulders collapse the second someone looks disappointed in you? Every one of those reactions is a data point in a private file on your weakness. Pay attention. They track how quickly the word sorry leaves your mouth. Do you apologize before anyone even criticizes you? Do you rush to fill the silence with explanations, context, childhood trauma? Anything to prove you're not a bad person? They notice if you keep repeating yourself, circling the same apology like you're begging for emotional parole. Picture this. You send an email with a small mistake. Your manager points it out. Do you say, "Got it, I'll fix it," or do you unload a paragraph of self-blame and justification? "I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry. I've been so overwhelmed. I promise it'll never happen again." You think you're proving you care. Here's the harsh reality. You just proved you can be controlled through guilt on command. They also watch what happens after the moment passes. Do you keep checking in? Are we okay? Are you mad at me? Do you still respect me? That's not just insecurity, that's a roadmap. Now they know, if they want you to fold, all they have to do is look a little disappointed, and then go quiet. Your fear will do the rest. Every over-apology is not just a sentence. It's a blueprint. When you spill your guilt all over the floor, you're handing people architectural plans to your emotional structure. They see where the support beams are. Your need to be seen as good, generous, competent. They see where the cracks are. Your terror of being called selfish, lazy, or incompetent. And trust me, the wrong person only needs one reliable crack to bring the whole thing down. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. One consistent weakness is enough for someone to steer your decisions for years. A boss who knows you can't stand being seen as difficult will overload you with work. A partner who knows you're terrified of being selfish will weaponize it every time you set a boundary. A friend who knows you crumble when they go cold will use silence as a leash. In every workplace, every friend group, every relationship, someone is watching how you handle being wrong and deciding what you are to them. Leader, liability, or tool. Your behavior during a mistake tells them which role you're available for. And here's the part you really need to hear. Right now, your apologies are probably audition tapes for the role of tool. In the next section, you're going to learn how to walk into the same situations, make the same mistakes, and send a completely different signal. One that makes people think twice before ever using your guilt against you. Right now, the way you say sorry is probably the most expensive habit you have, and you don't even see the bill. You think you're repairing trust. You're actually burning status. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. There isn't just apologizing. There's apologizing too fast, too often, and too loudly. Each one drains power from you in a different way. Each one quietly tells people, you can control me through guilt. Apologizing too fast is when you rush to say I'm sorry before you even understand what happened. Someone looks disappointed, you flinch. Someone raises their voice, you fold. You don't investigate. You don't ask questions. You instantly accept blame. And here's the harsh reality. When you respond faster than you think, you teach people that your emotions outrun your mind. They stop seeing you as stable. They start seeing you as reactive, anxious, and easy to steer. Then there's apologizing too often. You say sorry for the weather, for other people's moods, for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sorry, can I ask a question? Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry, that wasn't clear. Have you ever noticed how this turns every interaction into a confession that you are the problem? Over time, people don't separate real mistakes from your automatic guilt. They just label you insecure, low value, permanently at fault. And then we have apologizing too loudly. The public spectacle, the long text essay, the dramatic voice note. You turn a small misstep into a full emotional documentary about your flaws. You think you're being honest and vulnerable. Trust me, most people are not thinking, wow, so noble. They're thinking, good, this person has no armor. Your self-flagellation becomes entertainment, and in power dynamics, entertainment is never respected. Modern negotiation and leadership research backs this up. When leaders respond to failure with clear next steps instead of self-blame, they're rated as more competent and more trustworthy. Not more nice, more trustworthy. Why? Because their focus stays on the problem, not on their personal shame. They don't collapse into emotion. They move into control. Picture this. A weak apology sounds like this. I'm so sorry. I always mess things up. I feel terrible. I don't know what's wrong with me. Please don't be mad. Emotional, rambling, completely self-centered. The spotlight is not on the damage done or the solution. It's on your meltdown. A strong response is different. You're right, this missed the mark. Here's what I'm doing in the next 48 hours to fix it. I'll update you Friday. Brief, factual, action-oriented. No self-humiliation, no begging. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People remember less about the mistake and more about whether you stayed composed or crumbled. That terrifies them when you stay calm. In the next part, you're going to learn 7 Machiavellian ways to handle mistakes so that when something goes wrong, people don't remember your apology. They remember your posture, your silence, your direction, and they think twice before ever trying to weaponize your guilt again. So here's what you're actually going to get in this video. Not theory. Not feel-good advice about owning your truth. You're going to walk away with 7 specific Machiavellian behaviors that let you own your mistakes without looking weak, so people quietly fear disappointing you instead of circling like vultures the second you slip. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. You don't rise or fall on the size of your mistake. You rise or fall on how you react. These 7 behaviors are the difference between, wow, they handled that like a leader, and yeah, we can push this person whenever we want. Pay attention, because every mistake you make is already running that test on you. Here's the harsh reality. When you mess up, the room is not looking for your guilt. They are scanning for weakness. Behavior by behavior, you're going to learn how to walk into that room, shift the energy back in your favor, and make people feel it. You will learn how to stand there after a failure and have everyone watching your composure, your silence, your next move, instead of your shame. The first benefit, you'll be able to flip the emotional temperature in any situation you should be embarrassed in. Picture this. Your project fails publicly. Instead of a shaky, over-explained apology, you give a brief acknowledgement. One clear correction, one clear deadline. No rambling, no self-attack. That calm direction makes people respect you more after the mistake than before it. That terrifies them, because their usual weapon, your guilt, stops working. Second, you're going to learn how to force respect even from people who don't like you. Have you ever noticed how some leaders can make huge errors and still walk out with more authority? It's not luck, it's behavior. They accept responsibility without self-humiliation. They control the narrative. And they never let their emotion leak into a public confession. You will learn exactly how to do that, step by step, in real situations with real stakes. Third, these behaviors will strip people of their ability to weaponize your guilt. Right now, you give people too much emotion, too much confession, too much access to your mind when you're afraid you've done something wrong. Trust me, every manipulator in your life notices that. By the end, you'll know how to use framing, silence, and decisive action, so sorry is no longer a leash around your neck. And behavior 7? That's the keystone. That's the one that separates leaders from targets. It's how you handle a public error when everyone is watching, when your status is on the line. You think you already know how to apologize like a leader? Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most people who say that just know how to confess like people pleasers. So stay until the end and score yourself mentally on each behavior. Because your current default response to mistakes is doing one of two things, it's either protecting your power, or it's slowly destroying your status while you call it being honest. Behavior 1. You don't bleed emotion when you're caught wrong. Not less emotional, not a bit calmer. You shut off the emotional leak completely. You're wrong, you're exposed, and you don't flinch. You don't over-explain, you don't perform guilt, you don't start defending your entire personality. You stay composed. You listen. You respond like nothing in your identity is under attack. Picture this. You're in a meeting, you make a claim, and someone calls you out in front of everyone. They've got the data. You're clearly off. Most people in that moment, their face changes, their voice cracks. They rush into a 5-minute justification speech that screams, "Please don't think I'm useless." You don't. You hold eye contact. You nod once. You say, calmly, "You're right. Here's what happens next." And then you move straight into the solution, the correction, the next step. No drama, no self-humiliation, no emotional bleed on the floor for people to step on. Pay attention, that single behavior changes the entire power dynamic in the room. You think being wrong destroys your status, but actually, it's how you react to being wrong that writes your reputation. Most people tie being wrong to being worthless, so they panic. They hear you are mistaken as you are nothing, and their whole nervous system goes into survival mode. Here's the harsh reality. When you don't do that, when you accept the hit without collapsing, you show people something rare. You show them your value is not fragile. Your worth is not up for public negotiation every time you slip. That terrifies them, because they can't use embarrassment as a weapon against you. Have you ever noticed how people poke, correct, and call you out with a little smile, just to see if you'll crumble? It's not about truth, it's about control. They want to watch you scramble, apologize, and bleed emotion so they feel taller. When you stay still, when your voice stays level, they lose that hit of power. Their favorite lever stops working. Machiavelli warned that a ruler must appear unshaken by fortune. Storm, scandal, mistake, betrayal, it doesn't matter. The image must be of someone whose center of gravity is deep and hard to move. Your emotional stillness under criticism is that image. You're not pretending you're never wrong, you're demonstrating that being wrong doesn't move your core. Trust me, people remember that. Reputation science is clear. They remember how you handled the mistake more than the mistake itself. Your tone, your posture, your calm hears what happens next lodges in their mind as authority. Burn this into your mind. Whoever controls your emotions controls you. When you refuse to emotionally spike, you deny people the levers they're used to pulling on everyone else. They can correct you, but they can't steer you. They can expose a flaw, but they can't own your reaction. And once you master that stillness, then comes the next level of power. How you speak about the mistake itself. Now we move to the part that really makes people uncomfortable. What happens in the room when you finally speak? Because here's the harsh reality. Everyone is trained to expect the same pathetic script when someone is wrong. Accusation, emotional defense, frantic apology, awkward silence. That's the loop. You've seen it at work, in families, in relationships. Someone gets called out, they panic, they over-explain, they over-apologize, and the whole room quietly downgrades them. Respect drops. Power leaks. Have you ever noticed how people almost lean forward when a mistake is exposed? They want the show, they want the breakdown. They want to see you scramble, because that tells them exactly how to control you. Too much emotion, too much guilt, too much visible weakness. That's the usual performance, and everyone subconsciously expects you to follow it. Now picture this. The criticism lands. You hear it. You don't rush. You don't defend. You pause. You breathe. You keep your posture. Then, in a flat, steady tone, you say, "You're right on that point." No drama, no trembling voice, no self-humiliation. Immediately after, you add, "Here's what gets corrected, and here's the timeline." Then you stop talking. Silence, not nervous silence. Controlled silence. Your eyes calm, your body still. You just admitted fault, but you didn't bleed. That single behavior short-circuits the entire script people were waiting for. They were ready for tears, excuses, or a desperate "I'm so sorry." They prepared to watch you crumble. Instead, you stayed upright. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. That moment creates cognitive dissonance in their mind. They're thinking, wait, you were wrong, but you're not collapsing? You're not begging? You're not chasing my approval? Their brain has to rewrite your psychological profile. You go from easy to rattle to dangerously composed. And trust me, in power dynamics, that shift is everything. This is why strong leaders can admit failure and somehow walk away with more authority. The failed launch, the bad call, the public criticism, handled with calm admission and a precise correction plan, turns into proof of competence, not weakness. You think people remember the mistake. They don't. They remember how your mind reacted under pressure. Here's the harsh reality. When you can be publicly wrong and still look unshaken, you scare people a little. If this doesn't rattle you, what does? If this level of exposure doesn't make you flinch, what would it take to break you? That question hangs in their head. That uncertainty is where quiet fear begins. Pay attention. You just turned "I was wrong" into "I am unbreakable." You didn't beg for forgiveness. You announced the next move. And that terrifies them far more than 1,000 apologies. But this is only the setup, because when you combine that calm admission with one more behavior, your mistakes stop being setbacks at all. They become warnings. In the next part, you'll see how to make every correction feel less like repair and more like inevitability, because inevitability is about one thing: control of the story, not the event, the story. Behavior 2 is brutal and simple. You frame the mistake before anyone else can. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. The mistake itself is not what destroys you. The story people tell about it is. You think you're being responsible when you wait, when you let things settle, when you watch how people react. But by the time you speak, the narrative is already written, and it's never written in your favor. Pay attention. Powerful people do the opposite. They move first. You are the one who labels what happened, what it means, and what happens next. You don't wait for gossip, critics, or enemies to define it. You define it, publicly, clearly, and without emotion. That's not damage control. That is dominance over perception. Picture this: a project you led just failed. The rollout underperformed, clients are annoyed, and you can feel the whispers starting. Most people would hide, send a vague email, or wait for the meeting where someone else brings it up and forces an apology. You walk into the room and say, the rollout underperformed because of X and Y. Here's the 90-day correction plan and the new standard. No drama, no self-pity, just a verdict and a sentence. Here's the harsh reality. When you do that, you intimidate people. Why? Because you act like a judge, not a defendant. You show you're not afraid of the mistake, you're not hiding from it, and you're not begging anyone to declare you competent. You already passed judgment on yourself and moved straight to execution of the solution. That terrifies them, because most people only know how to attack weakness, not how to handle someone who stays in control, even while bleeding. Have you ever noticed how when a leader gives a tearful, rambling apology, respect drops instantly? The focus shifts from the problem to their personal inadequacy. Modern research backs this up. Over-apologizing drags attention away from solutions and onto your supposed flaws. Your sorry becomes evidence against you. You just handed your enemies free ammunition. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He warned that it's more important to appear virtuous than to confess every failure. Perception outweighs confession. When you frame the mistake yourself, you don't look guilty and cornered. You look decisive and strategic. You look like someone who always has a next move, even when the last one misfired. Contrast that with the average person. They wait. They hope it blows over. They stay silent until someone confronts them. Then they panic and apologize reactively. By then, the narrative is already poisoned. Their apology doesn't clean it up. It confirms the worst version. See? They admitted. They were careless. They were in over their head. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. If you don't frame your own mistakes, someone else will frame your entire identity. In the next behavior, you'll see how to go even further, how to turn that frame into a warning shot that makes people think twice before ever betting against you again. So here's the harsh reality. The person who names the mistake first doesn't just explain what happened. They decide what it means. They write the script everyone else repeats when you're not in the room. Every error has three battles: what actually happened, what people think happened, and what they remember 6 months from now when your name comes up in a meeting. Pay attention, only the first one is about facts. The second and third are about narrative, and narrative belongs to whoever frames it first and most confidently. Have you ever noticed how two people can live through the exact same disaster, and one walks away branded as incompetent, while the other walks away branded as decisive? That's not about the event, that's about the story. The first person waits to be accused, then reacts. The second person steps out first and defines the terms. Here's the issue, here's what it shows, here's what happens next. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. When you rush in with "I'm so sorry, I messed everything up, I feel terrible," you think you're being honest. You think you're being noble, but you are handing people a script that says, "I am emotional, I am overwhelmed, I am unsure I belong in this role." You turn a single mistake into a global confession of weakness. A Machiavellian leader does the opposite. Same mistake, completely different behavior. They say, "Here's where my call was off. Here's the new standard I'm enforcing going forward." No crying, no self-hate, no public self-flagellation. You still accept reality, but you frame it as a calibration, not a collapse. You react without looking reactive. A CEO just had a failed product launch. Numbers are bad, reviews are worse, the press is circling. Most people would crawl onto a stage and bleed apology. This CEO walks out and says, "The launch underperformed. That's on my call. Here's our 90-day correction plan. Here are the 3 changes already in motion, and here's the next milestone I will personally own." 2 minutes. Then they leave the stage. What do people feel? Not pity, not disgust. Control, composure, power. The failure is still real, but the frame is, this person is in charge of the problem, not, this person is the problem. Trust me, that difference decides promotions, elections, and who keeps their head when the knives come out. Reputation science backs this up. People barely remember the details of what went wrong. They remember your tone, your posture, your calm or your collapse. The mind is lazy. It uses the way you handled the fallout as a shortcut for who you are. A strong frame, delivered with steady energy, can overshadow the actual error. So here's the question. What happens when you combine that narrative control with strategic silence? When you stop over-explaining, stop begging, and say less. But every word lands like a verdict instead of a plea? In the next behavior, you'll see how to make your few words feel final, and that terrifies them. Behavior 3, you use silence as a weapon, not a surrender. You stop feeding people a live stream of your emotions, and you let the quiet do the cutting. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. In power dynamics, the first one to fill the air usually loses control of it. Most people rush. They rush to defend, rush to explain, rush to say, "I'm sorry, let me just clarify." You think you're fixing the problem, but you're actually proving your weakness. You're proving that their criticism owns your mind. Here's the harsh reality. When you panic-fill the silence after a mistake, you don't regain respect. You auction it off. You're in a meeting. Your boss calls you out hard in front of everyone. "This report was sloppy. You dropped the ball and made us look bad." All eyes swing to you. This is the moment where most people babble. "Well, actually I was waiting on. I didn't have the numbers. I'm really sorry. Next time They bleed credibility with every extra word. Now watch the Machiavellian version. Same attack. Same room. You look at them. You hold eye contact. 1, 2, 3 beats of pure silence. No flinch. No nervous smile. You let their words echo in their own head. Then you say calmly, "The issue is already being fixed. You'll have the corrected report by 3 p.m. And you stop. No apology tour, no emotional essay. Just the next step. Have you ever noticed how people start backpedaling when you don't immediately defend yourself? Silence is not weakness. Silence is psychological warfare. People panic when they can't read your reaction. They start thinking, "Did I go too far? Did I misjudge them? What are they planning? Your calm silence becomes a mirror that throws their aggression back at them. Psychologically, most people are terrified of silence because it feels like judgment. They need noise to prove they're still in control. When you're comfortable in the quiet, you flip the power dynamic. Now they feel exposed. Now they feel like the one who overreacted. Trust me, they remember that feeling the next time they consider attacking you in public. This is pure Machiavellian distance. A ruler never lets people fully read his inner world. Machiavelli understood. Power requires mystery. When you respond with controlled silence and one decisive line, people realize they don't actually know what you're thinking, what you'll do later, or how you'll move behind the scenes. That terrifies them more than any loud argument. But pay attention, this is not passive silence. This is not you shutting down, sulking, or avoiding responsibility. That behavior screams guilt and invites more pressure. Strategic silence is deliberate, measured, and always followed by action you can point to. You don't whine, you execute. You don't over-explain, you correct the problem in real time. And here's where it gets dangerous. Once you master this, you can combine silence with one more behavior that makes people question every move they make around you. Because what happens when you're quiet isn't just calm, but also unpredictable. When your quiet becomes unpredictable, your words become weapons. Not comfort, not confession. Weapons, and the fewer you use, the sharper they cut. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most people self-destruct the moment they're accused of a mistake. They don't just respond, they spill. They bleed out every detail, every emotion, every excuse, trying to prove they're not a bad person. You've seen it. Someone gets called out, and suddenly they're giving a full documentary, backstory, childhood trauma. 10 reasons it's not what it looks like. That's the over-explainer. Too much talking, too much emotion, too much information about their mind under pressure. And here's the harsh reality. The more they talk, the weaker they look. Because every extra sentence is a hook. Every justification is a quote someone can repeat later. Every nervous detail is another angle for people to twist, gossip about, and use against them when they want control. Now picture this, same mistake, same criticism, two different reactions. Person 1 launches into a 5-minute TED Talk apology. Person 2 looks up and says, "Noted, I'll adjust." Then goes back to work. No drama, no speech, no emotional tour of their soul. Which one do you respect more? Which one feels like they still have power? Trust me, people read that difference instantly. The over-explainer looks like they're begging for forgiveness. The brief one looks like they're already fixing the issue and don't need emotional permission to do it. Pay attention to what happens inside other people when you say less. Their mind does not go quiet. It gets louder. They start asking themselves, what is he thinking? Is she angry? Is there a bigger plan? Did I misjudge this person? Your silence becomes a blank screen, and their fear starts projecting on it. And that terrifies them. Because when they cannot read your emotion, they cannot predict your behavior. When they cannot predict your behavior, they cannot control you. Over-talking gives them a map of your guilt, your insecurity, your weak spots. Brevity erases the map. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People subconsciously link your mouth to your mind. If your speech is all over the place, they assume your emotions are all over the place. If your words are controlled, they assume your inner world is controlled. Controlled speech signals internal control. Internal control signals higher status. That's why a leader who says, "Here's what happened, here's the correction, we move in 90 days, is rated as more competent than the one sobbing through a monologue about how bad they feel. So when you're wrong, you don't shrink into endless explanation. You respond briefly, you act decisively, and you let their imagination do the rest. Because in the next behavior, you won't just stay calm after a mistake. You'll do something far more aggressive. You'll use that moment as an excuse to expand your territory. Behavior 4. When you mess up, you don't retreat. You expand. You use the mistake as a reason to grab more territory, not surrender what you already had. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most people treat a mistake like a courtroom. They walk in already guilty, begging for mercy, handing over their power in the form of apologies, explanations, and self-humiliation. You treat a mistake like a battlefield. You step forward, claim the ground, and take command of the cleanup. Picture this. You misjudge a project timeline at work. The deadline hits, and you're behind. Everyone turns to you, waiting for the classic script. "I'm so sorry, I messed this up. I'll try to do better." That's the weak way. That's the training that makes you easy to control. Instead, you look them in the eye and say, calmly, "That's on me. I'll personally lead the next phase and report progress every Friday. You'll have an update in your inbox by 4 p.m. this week." Then you stop talking. Notice what you just did. You admitted the error without collapsing. You didn't step back. You stepped in. You didn't wait to be punished. You assigned yourself a bigger role. You grabbed visibility. You grabbed responsibility. You grabbed control of the narrative. And here's the harsh reality that unsettles people. They expected you to drop in status. You just promoted yourself instead. Have you ever noticed how people secretly enjoy when someone grovels after a mistake? The long apology, the emotional breakdown, the "I'm the worst, I don't deserve this role." It feeds their ego. It tells them you are below them. When you refuse that role and calmly claim more authority, it scrambles their expectations. They start thinking, if he reacts like this under pressure, how much power does he actually have? That terrifies them. Machiavelli understood this. In The Prince, rulers who hesitated after a setback were seen as weak, and weakness invited attacks. But the ones who answered failure with more initiative, more bold action, more visible command, rebuilt fear and respect. You're doing the same thing on a smaller stage. You turn a mistake into a demonstration. You cannot be scared away from power by a single blow. You move deeper into it. Pay attention, because this is where most people get it wrong. This behavior is not denial. You still say, "That's on me." You still acknowledge reality, but you immediately weld that admission to a controlled, specific plan, timeline, actions, checkpoints. You keep yourself at the center of the solution instead of exiling yourself to the edge of the room. Trust me, people remember how you handled the mistake more than the mistake itself. Your posture, your tone, your decision to expand instead of shrink, this is what rewires your reputation. And in the next behavior, you'll take it even further. You won't just grab territory in the moment, you'll quietly rewrite the story everyone tells about what happened. So here's where the game flips. You think a mistake means you should disappear, lower your head, and wait for the storm to pass. That reaction is exactly what makes people quietly downgrade you in their mind. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most people equate "I messed up" with "I'm disqualified." One bad call, one wrong judgment, and they instantly treat themselves like they've been fired from their own life. They speak less. They avoid eye contact. They move to the edge of the room and hope no one remembers their name. Have you ever noticed how fast people exile themselves when they feel guilty? Here's the harsh reality, that self-erasure doesn't read as humility. It reads as confirmation. You think you're being respectful. They read, "He knows he shouldn't be here. She knows she's not built for this." Guilt makes you shrink, and shrinking tells everyone your power was fragile in the first place. Now contrast that with a different behavior. You make a mistake. You misjudge, you miscalculate, you misread the situation. But instead of retreating, you step forward. You speak a little clearer, you take a more central seat, you start laying out the next move. That single shift rewires the story in their mind. Suddenly, it's not, "You failed, so you're out." It becomes, "You failed, but you're clearly still the one driving this, so we have to work through you." Pay attention. When you increase your presence right after a slip, you send one brutal message. "I am not optional here. I am inevitable." That terrifies them far more than an apology ever could. Why? Because it tells their nervous system, "You don't get to erase me with one mistake. I'm still the axis this thing turns on." People respect what insists on existing. Picture this. A manager blows it in a meeting. They publicly snap at an employee, accuse them of dropping the ball, and the room goes quiet. Later that week, same team, same room. The manager walks in calm, centered, not hiding. "Last time, I misjudged Sarah," they say, steady voice, full eye contact. "She was right. I was wrong. So she's leading the next phase, and I'm backing her call." Then they give Sarah more responsibility, more visibility, more control. No groveling, no emotional oversharing, just precise correction and a bigger bet. What happens in that moment? The employee feels seen instead of crushed. The team sees a leader who can course correct without collapsing, and the power dynamic actually tilts in the manager's favor because they proved they can be wrong without becoming weak. Trust me, that is rare. That is dangerous. So here's the uncomfortable question. What happens when you combine this step-forward instinct with something even more ruthless? A standard for yourself so high, so unforgiving, that no one else can weaponize your flaws because you already hit yourself harder than they ever could. In the next behavior, you're going to see how terrifying that version of you really is. That version of you is dangerous because you do something almost no one does. You judge yourself in public before anyone else can. And you do it without bleeding. Behavior 5, you judge yourself publicly, but never emotionally. You don't wait for people to drag you. You step up, state the standard, state the miss, state the correction. No tears. No drama. No self-hate monologue. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most people only take responsibility when they're already cornered. They're not being honest. They're negotiating for mercy. You're going to do the opposite. You set the standard yourself, you say where you fell short, and you declare the adjustment in a flat, controlled tone. It sounds like this: by my standard, that decision was sloppy. I'm tightening my process like this. And then you outline the fix, calmly. No, I'm such an idiot. No, I always mess things up. You judge the behavior, not your identity. That difference is everything. Pay attention, because here's the harsh reality. The second you start calling yourself names, people feel licensed to agree. You say, I'm so stupid, and watch how quickly they start treating you like you are. You dramatize your guilt, and you hand them a lower identity to pin on you. You think you're being humble, but you're actually training people to see you as weak. Picture this: a manager blows a call in a meeting and wastes a week of work. Publicly, they say, that call was rushed. My standard is thorough review. From now on, decisions like that go through a 24-hour check. Then they move on. No groveling. No emotional performance. That terrifies them, because there is nothing left to stab. You already named the flaw, and surgically removed it. When you do this, you disarm attackers. What can they expose that you haven't already admitted without shame? You are sloppy. Correct, I said that, and I've already changed the process. Their weapon turns into an echo. They look obsessed. You look in control. Machiavelli understood this game. A ruler must appear just and principled. But he warned that appearances matter more than confessions. When you enforce a clear standard on yourself in public, you look principled. You look like someone whose mind is governed by rules, not by mood. Yet because you strip out emotion, you give enemies no handle, no guilt to twist, no visible weakness to press. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Too much emotion in self-judgment is not honesty, it is bait. It invites pity, attack, or both. Real power is cold clarity. This failed. This violated my standard. Here's the correction. Full stop. Most people fear judgment so much they hide. You drag your own mistakes into the light, then stand over them without flinching. In the next behavior, you're going to take this even further, by controlling not just how you judge yourself, but exactly how much access anyone ever gets to your inner world at all. And here's where it gets dangerous for everyone around you. Most people only correct themselves when someone else attacks them. They wait to be called out. They wait to be shamed. That's why people feel so safe criticizing them. They can smell the insecurity. They know, if I push this person, they'll fold. They'll apologize. They'll explain. They'll beg me to like them again. That is blood in the water. That is weakness that invites more teeth. Have you ever noticed how the same people get piled on again and again? One public mistake, then a flood of comments, lectures, moral sermons. Why? Because their reaction trains everyone. They over-explain, over-apologize, overshare their guilt. They think they're being honest. They think they're being noble. But they're handing over control of their mind to the crowd. Now watch the contrast. Same mistake. Different posture. You say calmly, that wasn't up to my standard. Here's what failed. Here's what I'm doing next. No shaking voice. No emotional self-flagellation. No. Please understand how bad I feel. Just a clear verdict from an internal judge that is colder and stricter than any critic in the room. Here's the harsh reality. When you do that, you make every external critic look small. You show that your own standards are already higher than theirs. You already saw the flaw. You already issued the sentence. You already started the correction. So what are they going to add? You should feel bad? You already decided how you'll feel. You should fix it? You already announced the fix. Pay attention to the intimidation effect here. When you enforce high standards on yourself without flinching, you remove the main pleasure people get from attacking you. They can't break you. They can't watch you crumble. Your calm becomes a wall. Some will still try to poke at you, but it feels redundant, even petty, to pile on someone who has already dissected their own mistake with surgical precision. Picture this: a leader's project fails publicly. One leader posts a teary confession, paragraphs of guilt, respect drops. Another leader says, "The result missed my standard. Here are the 3 corrections over the next 90 days. No drama, just direction." Which one looks like power? Which one looks like they're still in control of the ship? Over time, this behavior builds a reputation that quietly protects you. People learn that you don't need to be dragged, exposed, or humiliated to change course. You correct yourself automatically. You are self-governing. That terrifies them, because they can't use guilt to steer you. But let me tell you something uncomfortable. There is still one trap that can pull you back into weakness. Not apologizing for what you did, apologizing for how people feel. In the next behavior, you're going to learn why that is the most dangerous apology of all, and how to kill it before it kills your respect. Behavior 6. You never apologize for feelings you didn't intend to control. Read that again, because this is where most nice people secretly hand over all their power. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. When you say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," you're not being noble. You're volunteering to be responsible for someone else's nervous system. You are saying, "Your emotion is my fault. Your storm is my job." And once you accept that job, you become their emotional servant. Have you ever noticed how some people never calm down? No matter how many times you apologize, you say sorry once, twice, 3 times. They're still offended, still wounded, still dragging it out. Why? Because the moment you apologize for their feelings, you've admitted a fake crime. Now they can keep prosecuting you forever. Here's the harsh reality. You are not responsible for any emotion you did not deliberately try to create. You own your words. You own your tone. You own your behavior and the concrete impact of your actions. But you do not own the stories people tell themselves in their head or the wounds they refuse to heal. That's their battlefield, not yours. Machiavelli would call this realism. People's feelings are unstable, impulsive, self-generated. A ruler who lets every tear, every sigh, every offended look dictate their choices will never act decisively. Today they're angry, you said no. Tomorrow they're hurt, you were direct. Next week they're upset, you were distant. If you chase every mood, you abandon your mission. So what do you do instead of, "I'm sorry you're upset"? You stay grounded. You say, "I see you're upset. Here's what I did. Here's what I meant. Here's what I'm willing to change going forward." No groveling. No self-attack. No taking responsibility for their entire emotional universe. You bring the focus back to behavior and reality, not drama and performance. Picture this. Someone accuses you. "You made me feel disrespected." Old you panics, apologizes for their emotion, and starts negotiating against yourself. New you answers, "Disrespect wasn't my intention. Here's what I said. Here's what I meant. I'm willing to do X differently. I'm not responsible for every feeling you have about it." That sentence alone will expose who actually wants resolution and who just wants control. And pay attention, because emotional responsibility is the favorite lever of manipulators. They weaponize your fear of being seen as mean or selfish. They say, "Wow, so you don't even care that I'm hurt." What they really mean is, "Why aren't you obeying my emotions?" Trust me, the moment you stop apologizing for feelings, their grip on your mind starts to crack. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. When you remove that lever, some people will escalate. They'll push harder, cry louder, threaten colder. What do you do when "I'm hurt" turns into open warfare? In the next behavior, you're going to learn exactly how to respond when people attack you for not collapsing. And this is where the guilt trap shows up, wearing a fake halo. Picture this. You tell a friend, I can't talk every night, I need my evenings to recharge. Or you tell a coworker, I won't answer messages after 7 p.m. You didn't insult them. You didn't attack them. You drew a clean boundary. And suddenly they're cold, distant, sighing, wow, I just didn't expect you to be like this. They don't say, you did something wrong. They say, you made me feel abandoned. You made me feel unimportant. And then they wait. Silence, staring, waiting for you to flinch, to rush in and fix their emotion. Have you ever noticed how fast your mouth moves when someone says, you really hurt me, even when you know you didn't do anything cruel? Here's the harsh reality. If every time someone looks wounded, you scramble to apologize, you are training them. You think you're being caring. You think you're being understanding. But you are teaching their nervous system that all they have to do is look hurt, and you will bend, backtrack, over-explain, and pay emotional ransom to get their approval back. That is not compassion. That is control. That is behavioral conditioning. Too much guilt, too much explaining, too much responsibility for emotions that were never yours to manage in the first place. So what do you do instead? You separate respect from responsibility. You respect their emotion without accepting their guilt. You say, I hear that you're upset. You're allowed to feel that way. My boundary still stands. Calm voice. Steady eye contact. No panic, no rush, no essay-length justification. You validate their right to feel, but you do not sign the contract that says, your feelings are my fault. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People who rely on guilt as a weapon will hate this. They will accuse you of being cold, selfish, heartless. That's projection. They're not angry that you hurt them. They're angry that the old trick stopped working. Watch how this plays out in power. A manager cuts overtime because the team is burning out. One employee storms into their office. You don't care about us. You embarrassed me. I feel disrespected. Weak leaders collapse. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean, and suddenly the entire decision is on trial. Now it's about the leader's character, not the company's health. A leader with control does something different. I can see you're frustrated. That's fair. This decision is still the right one for the team long term. If you want to talk about how it affects your workload, we can do that. But the decision stands. No raised voice, no defensive speech, no emotional caretaking, just clarity. Pay attention to what happens next. They either adjust, or they reveal that what they wanted was not understanding, but power over your choices. And that terrifies them. Because once guilt doesn't move you, they only have one move left: direct confrontation. You messed up. You're wrong. You need to admit it. In the next behavior, you're going to learn how to walk straight into that attack without flinching, and flip the entire power dynamic with one question that makes manipulators panic. Behavior 7. You demand specifics before you offer regret. You don't flinch. You don't rush to say sorry. You go straight to the one question that flips the power. Specifically, what did I do or say? Pay attention, because this is where most people lose the game. They hear, you really hurt me, you disrespected me, you let me down, and instantly, they fold. They apologize for everything and nothing at the same time. They drown themselves in guilt before they even know what crime they're confessing to. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. That is exactly what manipulators want. Vague accusations. Foggy language. Emotional pressure with no clear definition. Why? Because as long as the charge is undefined, they can stretch it, reuse it, and weaponize it against you forever. You're not dealing with truth. You're dealing with control. Here's the harsh reality. Power lives in clarity. Weakness lives in vagueness. When you calmly say, be specific. What did I do exactly? You drag the conversation out of the emotional swamp and onto solid ground. Now you're not wrestling with their feelings in the dark. You're examining actions in the light. Have you ever noticed how angry people get when you ask for details? Watch what happens with a manipulator. They repeat the same vague line. They say, you just did. You know what you did. It's the way you are. They circle. They stall. They escalate the emotion instead of answering the question. Because once they have to name a concrete behavior, their spell breaks. This is why your question terrifies them. Undefined guilt lets them rewrite history whenever they want. Specifics lock the story in place. Now it can be measured, challenged, or even rejected. And they fear that. But here's where your strength really shows. If they finally give you something clear, you don't run, you don't argue, and you don't grovel. You say, "You're right. I did raise my voice and talk over you in that meeting. Next time, I'll ask for your input before we move on." Direct, limited, controlled, you accept responsibility for the action, not for their entire emotional universe. Picture this. A leader makes a bad call at work. Instead of a teary performance about how awful they feel, they say, "I made the wrong call on that deadline. Here's the new plan for the next 30 days. No self-humiliation, no emotional overshare, just clarity and direction." People don't walk away thinking, "What a failure." They walk away thinking, "That's someone who stays in control under pressure." Leaders demand clarity before they offer regret. Targets apologize first and hope clarity never comes. You think you're being noble when you rush to say sorry, but you're training people to attack you with the vaguest words they can find. In the next part, you're going to see how to close the loop, how to correct your mistakes with cold, decisive action so people feel your strength, not your shame. And this is where the line gets drawn. From this point on, every mistake you make is doing something brutal in the background. It's assigning you to one of two roles, leader or target. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. In any high-stakes environment, people are not listening to your apology to decide if you're a good person. They're watching your behavior to decide if you're safe to attack. Every time you're wrong, the room is asking one question: do we follow this person, or do we feed on them? Pay attention, because the target pattern is everywhere. You mess up, your stomach drops, and you rush in with emotion. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I feel terrible." You over-explain. You start giving a full documentary of your mind, your stress, your excuses. You accept vague blame for everything, even things no one accused you of. Your voice gets smaller, your body shrinks, and then you wait. You wait for someone else to decide your fate. Have you ever noticed how targets always end up negotiating for their own dignity after they've already surrendered it? The more they talk, the weaker they look. The more guilt they show, the more people pile on. Modern research backs this up. Over-apologizing shifts attention away from the problem and onto your supposed inadequacy. You think you're buying forgiveness. You're actually advertising yourself as prey. Now picture this, same mistake, different posture. A leader does not rush in bleeding emotion. A leader doesn't babble. A leader steps in calm. Yes, this went wrong. Here's what happened. Here's what changes by Friday. Short, clear, controlled. They demand specifics. Show me exactly where the failure was. They set standards. This is the level we operate at. This missed the mark. Then they name decisive next steps and assign responsibility. No shrinking. If anything, their presence expands. Here's the harsh reality. People fear crossing leaders, not because leaders never get challenged, but because when they are challenged, they don't crumble. They don't melt into guilt. They don't hand over control of their emotions. Their standards stay firm and consistent, even when they're the one who failed. That terrifies them. Why? Because you cannot destabilize someone whose rules for themselves are stricter than anything you could impose. Trust me, reputation science is cruel. Most people won't remember the exact details of your mistake. They will remember if you stood up straighter or folded in on yourself. They will remember if your silence was composed or panicked. They will remember if your apology felt like leadership or like a public execution. And here's the uncomfortable part. You don't get to turn this on only when it's convenient. In the next sections, you're going to see how to build these 7 behaviors into your daily life so they become instinct, not performance. Because when pressure hits again, you won't have time to act powerful. You'll only have time to be what you already are. So let's turn the knife a little deeper. Because before you build these behaviors into instinct, you have to confront the identity that's been running you. The version of you that apologizes just to stay liked. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most of your apologies are not about responsibility. They're about fear. Pay attention. Replay your last 3 apologies in your mind right now. What were you really trying to do? Fix the situation, or make sure they didn't think you were a bad person? Picture this. You send a text that lands wrong. Instantly you fire off, I'm so sorry, I'm the worst, I always mess things up. Nervous laughter in your voice, a wall of explanation. It's just how I grew up, my parents were like this. I have anxiety, I didn't sleep. You don't just say, that was off, I'll correct it. You write a confession letter about your entire personality and beg them to say, no, you're fine, you're not that bad. Have you ever noticed how you do that even when the mistake is small? You over-explain, you overshare, you over-confess. Too much emotion, too much honesty, too much visibility into your inner world. And trust me, every time you do it, people learn something dangerous. If I show disappointment, if I pull away, you'll panic and chase my approval. Here's the harsh reality. That isn't humility. That is a survival strategy built on one core belief burned into your nervous system. If people are upset with me, I'm unsafe, not uncomfortable. Unsafe, your mind equates a frown, a cold tone, a delayed reply with a threat to your existence. So you rush to neutralize it with apology, self-attack, and emotional discounts on your own worth. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. That belief makes you incredibly easy to control. People don't need power, money, or status over you. They just need to sound disappointed. They just need to sigh, go quiet, say, wow, I didn't expect that from you. And you will hand over your time, your energy, your boundaries, just to get their respect back. And this is where it gets brutal. That version of you, the please still like me apologist, cannot lead, cannot negotiate, cannot be taken seriously in high-stakes rooms, no matter how talented you are. You walk into a boardroom, a salary conversation, a conflict, carrying that identity, and everyone can smell it. They don't fear losing you. You fear losing them. Pattern interrupt. Think about the leaders you respect most. Do you see them spiraling into I'm the worst, I always mess up, please tell me I'm not a monster every time they slip? Or do you see calm acknowledgement, clear correction, and then silence? Right now, your script for mistakes makes you shrink so others feel safe. In the next parts, we're going to burn that script. By the end of this video, you'll have a new identity for when you mess up, one that makes people adjust to you, not the other way around. And that terrifies them far more than any apology ever could. So now you need a new self, a new role. Not the guilty child waiting to be punished, but the ruler walking through fire without flinching. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People are not judging your heart. They are judging your posture. They are asking, is this person stable when things go wrong, or do they collapse? The Machiavellian self understands this. You are not building a reputation for being perfect. You are building a reputation for being steady. You expect to be wrong sometimes. You expect backlash. You expect people to misunderstand you, twist your words, project their fears onto you. So when it happens, you don't treat it like a personal crisis. It's just weather. You don't argue with the rain. Here's the harsh reality. Most people lose power not when they make a mistake, but when they emotionally unravel in public. They over-explain. They confess like they're in a courtroom. They start managing everyone's feelings, begging for reassurance. That behavior screams weakness. A Machiavellian ruler does the opposite. You stay emotionally opaque. Your face doesn't leak panic. Your voice doesn't rush. Your silence doesn't apologize. You think people want your guilt. They don't. They want to know if you're still in control. Reputation research is clear. People remember how you handled the mistake far more than the mistake itself. So you control the narrative. You define what the event means. You say, here's what happened. Here's what changes next. Here's the timeline. Short, clean, decisive, no emotional monologue, no public self-flagellation. Picture this. A CEO's product launch fails. The internet is on fire. Instead of a teary, dramatic apology video, they step up, calm. We missed the mark. Here are the 3 changes we're implementing in the next 90 days. I'll report back on this date. Then they leave the stage. Modern leadership data shows leaders who respond with clear next steps and a steady tone are rated as more competent, even when the mistake was serious. Why? Because people feel safer around composure than around guilt. Pay attention to the traits here. Emotional opacity. You feel things, but you don't leak them everywhere. Narrative control. You frame the event before anyone else does. Self-set standards. You measure yourself against your own code, not against whoever is the loudest that day. and a ruthless refusal to be dragged into fixing everyone's feelings as the price of taking action. Have you ever noticed how the person who stays calm in a conflict quietly becomes the center of the room? That terrifies them, because your stability exposes their chaos. So try this on. Walk into your next conflict like a ruler whose job is to stabilize the room, not beg for forgiveness. Your question is not, do they still like me? Your question is, what needs to happen next? In the next section, we're going to turn this identity into a script, the exact words and moves you use when you're wrong, so you project strength without faking perfection. And before we hand you the exact words, you need to face something much darker right now. Who actually owns your guilt? Pay attention. Who do you over-apologize to? Whose name pops into your head when you're about to make a decision and you tense up because you don't want them to be upset? Who can change your entire plan with a sigh, a silent treatment, or a disappointed look? Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Those people are not just important to you. They are your current puppet masters. Not because they're smarter, not because they're stronger, but because they learned exactly how to pull your guilt strings and watch you react. Have you ever noticed how it's always the same faces? The parent who says, "Wow, you've changed," and suddenly you're explaining yourself like a teenager again. The partner who goes quiet until you chase them with, "Are you mad at me?" The boss who raises an eyebrow and you instantly volunteer to fix it, stay late, and apologize for things that weren't even your fault. Here's the harsh reality. You think you're being caring. You think you're being responsible. But your career, your time, your self-respect are being negotiated through one emotion: fear of being seen as bad. You're terrified of that label, so you trade your power for peace that never lasts. Picture this. You have one person in your life who, if they look disappointed, your whole nervous system collapses. You over-explain. You rush to say, "I'm sorry, I just felt," and you start apologizing for your emotions, not your actions, your emotions. That is the purest form of psychological surrender, and trust me, people who enjoy control can smell that weakness from a mile away. So here's your audit. Who gets instant access to your guilt? Who can make you justify your choices without even raising their voice? Who do you fear disappointing more than you fear betraying yourself? Say their name in your head right now. Don't dodge it. Now, choose one relationship. Not all of them. One. This is where you start applying what you're learning. With this person, you will demand specifics instead of absorbing vague blame. What exactly did I do? What specific outcome are you asking for? And you will refuse to apologize for feelings. I'm allowed to feel that way. What I will adjust is my behavior, not my emotions. If you don't do this, nothing else in this video matters. You will keep learning powerful techniques, then handing the remote control back to the same 3 people who know how to weaponize your guilt. Your promotions, your relationships, even who you become, will be shaped by who you're afraid of upsetting. In the next sections, I'm not just going to inspire you, I'm going to arm you. Concrete scripts. Micro-behaviors. The exact sentences you use when you're wrong, when you're confronted, when someone tries to drag you into a shame spiral, so you stay in control of the frame, without playing the weak, guilty character ever again. So let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Your mouth betrays you faster than your mistakes. You don't lose power when you mess up. You lose power in the first 3 seconds after you realize it. That's when most people rush to fill the silence with guilt, excuses, and the automatic word that kills their respect: sorry. Micro-behavior 1 is brutally simple. Before any apology, you pause. 3 seconds. 1 slow breath. That's it. Before you explain, before you defend, before you even move your lips, you silently count 1, 2, 3, and let your breath drop into your body. You think that's nothing. Here's the harsh reality. That tiny gap is the difference between you as a panicked people pleaser and you as a controlled operator. Because right now, you react. You feel a spike of fear, you feel the tension in the room, and your nervous system sprints to fix it by sacrificing your status. Sorry, my bad, I'm so stupid. You're not being noble. You're broadcasting weakness. Machiavelli would laugh at that. He warned that power is about appearance. If you look guilty, if you look desperate for forgiveness, People stop seeing a leader and start seeing prey. So what does the 3-second pause actually do? It cuts the wire between emotion and behavior. It interrupts that old script that says, if someone is upset, it must be my fault, and I must immediately bleed for them. In those 3 seconds, your rational mind finally has time to come online and ask the one question that protects your power. What exactly am I apologizing for? Pay attention, because that question alone will save you from a lifetime of humiliation. Use a simple internal checklist. First, is this my action? Did I actually do something wrong, or are they just uncomfortable with my boundary, my no, my existence? Second, is this their feeling? Are they hurt because I failed an agreement, or because reality didn't bend to their expectations? Third, do I need more specifics before I take responsibility? Have you ever noticed how fast manipulators get vague when they want you to feel guilty? You're just always selfish. Always? Really? Ask. What exactly bothered you? Before you offer your throat, from the outside, that 3-second pause looks powerful. You're not scrambling, you're considering. Your silence makes people wonder what's happening in your mind. Are you angry? Are you about to push back? Are you weighing consequences? That terrifies them more than a babbled apology ever could. Reputation science is clear. People remember how you handle a mistake more than the mistake itself. Your calm pause tells them, I do not panic under pressure. Trust me, you don't start with high-stakes confrontations. You train this in low-stakes moments until it's automatic. Someone bumps you in a hallway and expects you to say sorry even though they walked into you. Pause, breathe, decide. A coworker looks disappointed, and you feel that old urge to jump in with, sorry, was that dumb? Pause, breathe, ask, what's your concern? You're rewiring your reflex from self-blame to self-control. Because once this pause is locked in, the next move becomes dangerous. In a good way. In the next behavior, I'll show you what to say after the silence, so you can own the reality without ever stepping into the role of the weak, guilty actor again. Now we add the blade. The pause is the sheath. The next words are the cut. From now on, when you mess up, you do not open with, I'm so sorry. You open with, here's what happens next, or here's how I'll handle it. Short, clean, forward. You stop dragging people into your guilt, and you drag their attention into your plan. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most apologies are not about respect. They're about panic. You feel exposed, so you rush to throw yourself on the floor before anyone can push you. That is self-inflicted weakness. Machiavelli would laugh at that. He warned that a ruler must appear virtuous, not confess every flaw. Why? Because in power games, your public guilt becomes someone else's leverage. So you flip the script. First, define reality. Then, define the correction. Only then, if needed, you add the words I'm sorry like seasoning, not like a flood. You think you're being noble when you lead with a long emotional apology. Here's the harsh reality. You are training people to see you as the problem, not the person who solves it. Picture this. Your team is waiting. The deadline passed. Everyone's tense. You walk in and you say, you're right, that deadline was missed. Here's what happens next. I'm reallocating 2 people, we're shipping a revised version in 7 days, and you'll get daily updates at 4 p.m. Then you pause. Only after the structure is clear do you add, and yes, I'm sorry for the delay. You'll see the difference this week. What are they focused on now, your flaw or your plan? Another one. You misjudged a call with a client, and it backfires. Instead of, oh my God, I'm so sorry I messed everything up, you say, I misjudged that call. Here's how I'll correct it. I'm going back to them with X, we'll adjust Y, and you'll have a new agreement on your desk by Friday. If the relationship calls for it, you finish with, I'm sorry for the extra friction. Responsibility without self-humiliation. Pay attention to the psychological shift here. When you lead with I'm sorry, people zoom in on your emotion, your weakness, your fear. When you lead with here's what happens next, their mind is forced onto the future, onto structure, onto control. You become the person moving the story forward. That terrifies them, because they can't feed on your shame anymore. And trust me, people remember how you handled the failure more than the failure itself. Leaders who respond with clear next steps are rated as more competent and more dangerous to underestimate. You're signaling, even when I fall, I land on my feet. But what happens when that's not enough? What happens when people don't just want a plan, they want a performance, tears, drama, visible pain, just to prove you really care? In the next micro-behavior, we're going to dismantle that trap, and I'll show you how to stay cold, human, and untouchable at the same time. So here's what happens next. When a plan isn't enough, people start demanding a show. They don't just want you responsible, they want you broken. Tears, shaking voice, dramatic language, a full performance of pain. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most apologies in your life were not conversations. They were auditions. You were on trial, and the evidence wasn't what you did, it was how destroyed you looked about it. Have you ever noticed how people lean in, almost studying you, asking, do you even feel bad? What they're really asking is, will you bleed for me on command? The performance of pain looks like this. You cry on cue. You say things like, I feel so horrible, I'm the worst person, I can't believe I did that. You insult yourself before they can. You exaggerate your remorse, not because that's what you truly feel, but because you know that if you don't react dramatically enough, they'll say you're cold, selfish, uncaring. You think you're being honest, but you are teaching them a rule: no breakdown, no forgiveness. Here's the harsh reality. When you make your emotional collapse the currency of reconciliation, people start charging you more. They push the scene further, drag it out longer, demand bigger words, deeper self-humiliation. Why? Because your pain gives them power. Your weakness becomes their proof that they're right, they're superior, they're in control. And once that pattern is set, every conflict becomes a stage where you are required to suffer publicly just to get back to zero. Trust me, genuine emotion is not the problem. You're human. You're allowed to feel guilt, frustration, shame. But when you weaponize your own tears against yourself, when you use them as a negotiation tool, you train people to need your visible agony before they ever consider moving on. That is not remorse. That is emotional blackmail you agreed to participate in. So you need a new rule. You do not prove remorse with theatrics, you prove it with standards and behavior. Instead of, I feel so horrible, I can't believe I did that, you say, calmly, that was below my standard. Here's what I've already changed. Short, clear, no self-hate. No begging. You acknowledge the failure, you define your standard, and you show the correction. Your mind stays steady. Your voice stays level. Your power stays intact. Picture this: a leader's decision backfires. Weak leaders apologize with a trembling voice, promising they feel awful and will try their best. Strong leaders acknowledge the hit, outline a concrete correction, and then move. No emotional circus. And people, even if they're still angry, respect that posture more. But pay attention, because when you stop performing pain, manipulators will panic. They will accuse you of not caring, of being cold, of having no heart. In the next section, we're going to dismantle that accusation and show you exactly how to respond without giving them the meltdown they're hunting for. So when you stop bleeding all over the floor for people, what do? They don't say, wow, you've grown. They say, wow, you don't even care. They go straight for your throat. Have you ever noticed how fast that accusation comes out? The second you don't collapse, the second you don't perform guilt on command, suddenly you're cold, heartless, emotionless. Here's the harsh reality. That line is not about the mistake, it's about control. They're not upset that you hurt them. They're upset that they can't watch you crucify yourself for it. Picture this. You used to overreact. You'd cry, over-explain, over-apologize, promise the moon, hate yourself for days. That performance made them feel powerful. They could see exactly how to pull your strings. Now you stand there calm. You accept what happened. You outline what you'll do to fix it, and then you go quiet. No breakdown, no self-destruction. That terrifies them. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People who depended on your guilt performance will always accuse your composure of being cold. Because if you can stay steady, they lose their favorite weapon. They can't make you dance with shame. They can't drag you into emotional debt. Your silence stops being weakness and becomes power, and they feel it. So what do you say when they throw that line at you? You don't debate your heart. You don't open your chest and prove you care. You hold your frame and you say, clearly, I care enough to fix the problem, not to destroy myself over it. Then you shut up. No nervous laugh. No softening. Just steady tone. Steady eyes. Steady breathing. Pay attention to that sentence. It does three things at once. It affirms that you care. It rejects emotional self-harm as proof. And it drags the focus back to action, where your real power lives. You're not defending your feelings, you're defining the standard. Caring is measured by what you do next, not by how dramatically you punish yourself in front of an audience. You think you're being cold when you stop spiraling, but you're not. You're being disciplined. You're shifting from emotional theater to concrete behavior. A Machiavellian ruler would never stand in the town square sobbing for forgiveness. He would correct course, restore order, and let results speak. You're doing the same thing on a smaller scale. And here's the harsh reality again. Some people will leave when you stop destroying yourself to prove love. Let them. The ones who stay will quietly adjust to the new rules, because results are hard to argue with. They may still throw little tests, still say you don't care, just to see if they can drag you back into the old script. Will you take the bait, or will you stay in control of your mind? Because next, we're going to take this exact posture and drop it into 3 battlegrounds, where you lose the most power: your job, your relationships, and the way you talk to yourself. And when you see how different you look in each of those arenas, you won't recognize the old you. So let's drop you into the first arena. Your job, the place where one wrong sentence can quietly cost you a promotion. Have you ever noticed how one mistake at work makes people watch you differently, like they're waiting to see if you crumble or command the room? Picture this. You lead a client presentation. A number on your slide is wrong, and the client catches it. The room goes quiet. Your manager looks over. This is where most people panic, overtalk, and bleed power. You will not. First move, 3-second pause. Breathe, look at the screen, not the floor. That silence is you refusing to flinch on command. Then, if someone throws vague blame, this whole thing is a mess. What happened? You do not accept a foggy accusation. You say, calmly, be specific. Which part is incorrect? You force clarity. You don't let people dump every problem on your head just because you're convenient. That alone separates you from the office victims. Now you see the exact mistake. Here's the harsh reality. This is where most people start groveling. I'm so sorry, I feel terrible, I can't believe I did this. That's emotional self-harm in public. You just trained everyone to see you as unstable under pressure. Instead, you keep your voice level. That number is on me. The correct figure is X. Here's how we'll adjust. Short, clean, no drama. You move instantly to the correction plan. We'll send an updated deck in 1 hour, and I'll personally walk you through the impact on your timeline. Notice the pattern. Brief ownership. Fast solution. Increased responsibility. You don't shrink away from the problem, you grab more of it. Trust me, that terrifies them more than any tearful apology, because it shows you don't need to be rescued. What happens in your manager's mind? They don't see weakness. They see someone who can absorb a hit without losing structure. Machiavelli said it's more important to appear virtuous than to be virtuous. At work, it's more important to appear unshakable than to appear guilty. People remember how you reacted, not what went wrong. Now pay attention, because this is where most professionals lose control of the narrative. Public versus private. If the mistake was public and obvious, you acknowledge it in front of the team, but you do not turn the meeting into your therapy session. One firm sentence. That miss was mine. Here's what's already in motion to fix it. Then you move on. If the impact was mostly on your manager, you handle it one-on-one. No long story, no emotional oversharing. That decision was off. Here's what I've changed so it doesn't repeat. You show responsibility without self-humiliation. You repeat this behavior over months. No hiding, no collapsing. Just fast fixes and steady posture. People start saying it when you're not in the room. They don't hide from mistakes. They fix fast and stay steady. That's the foundation of quiet fear and respect. And when you bring this same posture into your relationships, the power shift is even more brutal. And when you bring this same posture into your relationships, the power shift is even more brutal. Picture this. You set a boundary, you cancel plans. You say something blunt instead of sugarcoating it. The other person's face drops. They go quiet. Or worse, they start with the guilt lines. Wow, that really hurt. I guess I just don't matter to you. You've changed. Your chest tightens. You feel that old training kick in, rush to apologize, rush to fix their emotion, rush to prove you're not a bad person. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. That reflex is exactly how people keep control over you. You think you're being caring. You think you're being loving. But you are performing guilt on command, and they know it. They don't have to argue with your boundary. They just have to act wounded and wait for you to crumble. Here's the harsh reality. In relationships, guilt is currency. Some people do not want respect. They want access. Access to your time, your energy, your silence, your obedience. And the fastest way to buy that access is to train you to believe that their feelings are your fault. Every single time. You set a healthy boundary, they react with hurt, and you immediately pay up with "I'm so sorry." That's emotional taxation. So what does never apologize look like here? It means you separate action from emotion. You own any real disrespect. You do not own their reaction to your legitimate boundary. You say, "I shouldn't have raised my voice. That's on me. Full stop." You also say, "I'm not going to apologize for needing that time alone, even if it upsets you." Notice the split? Behavior, yours. Emotion, theirs. Pay attention to the scripts you use. "I cancelled last minute. That was inconsiderate. I'll handle that better next time." Clean, direct, no self-humiliation. Then you hold the line, "But I still won't be available every weekend." That doesn't work for me. You don't over-explain. You don't beg them to understand. You let the silence do its work. That silence is power. At first, people will push harder. They'll escalate the hurt. "Wow, you really don't care. You're so cold now." Are you? Or are you just not collapsing on schedule anymore? Over time, something shifts. They realize your yes means yes, and your no means no. They realize guilt doesn't move you. Only reason and respect do. That terrifies them, but it also forces them to deal with you like an adult, not a puppet. And here's the filter no one warns you about. Some relationships are built entirely on your guilt performance. When you stop playing that role, those connections will crack. They'll accuse you of being selfish, heartless, arrogant. Good, let them. The ones who stay, the ones who adjust, are the ones who can handle a version of you that has boundaries and self-respect. In other words, you stop being emotionally rented and start being emotionally owned by you. And once you do that, your relationship to conflict itself changes, because now you can walk into confrontation without fear of being emotionally blackmailed. And once your relationship to conflict changes on the outside, there's one battlefield you can't ignore. The one in your own head. Because let me tell you something uncomfortable. The most brutal apologies you ever give are not to other people. They're to yourself, in the dark, on repeat, long after everyone else has moved on and forgotten. Here's the harsh reality. Every time you do that, you are training your nervous system to see yourself as weak, unreliable, beneath respect. You think you're being honest. You think you're holding yourself accountable. But you are actually teaching your brain, "I am the problem." Instead of, "That behavior missed the standard." One destroys your identity. The other sharpens it. A competent leader on a battlefield makes a bad call. Men are lost. Does he stand there screaming, "I'm useless, I ruin everything, of course I failed, I'm me"? If he did, everyone would drop him on the spot. He does what? Calm acknowledgement. Clear standard. Specific correction. No drama. No collapse. That is the same posture you need with yourself. So when you screw up, your internal script has to change. Not, "I'm pathetic." Not, "I always do this." You tell yourself with a steady tone, "That move was below my standard. Here's what I'll do differently next time." Then you name it. One change, one behavior, one adjustment. You react like a commander issuing orders, not a prisoner begging for mercy. Pay attention to the emotion in your self-talk. Is it a controlled verdict or a chaotic meltdown? Machiavellian power starts here, calm, precise language, even in your own head. You acknowledge, you set the standard, you define the plan, and you refuse to catastrophize. No always. No never. No prophecies of lifelong failure. Just, that was weak. I am not. Because trust me, if you treat yourself like a target, you will walk like a target. You will talk like a target. And people with sharp instincts will feel it. They won't even know why, but they will test you more, push you more, disrespect you more, because you already showed them, through your posture and your energy, that you agree you deserve less. You want people to fear losing your presence? Start by refusing to publicly execute yourself in your own mind. And once you clean up that internal arena, there's one more level of power that terrifies them: how you handle mistakes when the whole room is watching. So here's the harsh reality. Your mouth is betraying your power more than your mistakes are. It's not the error that ruins you. It's the reflexive, automatic sorry that tells everyone in the room, I will kneel before you the second I feel tension. So we're going to break that. Right now, pattern interrupt. For the next 7 days, you are on a strict protocol, no reflex apologies. Not one. Every time you feel sorry rushing up your throat, you stop. You pause. You choose a deliberate response, or you say nothing at all. Pay attention, because this is not a cute self-help challenge. This is behavioral warfare against your own need to be liked. You think you're being polite. You think you're being considerate. But you are training people to expect your surrender on command. For 7 days, that training ends. Here are the rules. You are allowed to apologize, but only after you've answered 2 questions in your own mind. First, what exactly am I apologizing for? Second, am I apologizing for my action or for someone else's emotion? Those are not the same thing. You spill coffee on someone's laptop, your action. You say I can't talk right now and they feel rejected, their emotion. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. When you apologize for people's feelings, you hand them the remote control to your behavior. They press hurt, you press sorry, and now they own you. Machiavelli would call that a terrible trade. You're giving away power in exchange for a fragile sense of safety. So during this week, every time you catch yourself, you run a quick scan. Did I actually violate a clear standard? Or did I just trigger someone's insecurity? If it's your mistake, you respond with strength. That was on me. Here's what I'm doing to fix it. Short, clean, no self-humiliation. If it's their emotion, you hold your frame. I hear you, that wasn't my intention. Or pure silence while you maintain eye contact. And you are going to track it. Not in some elaborate journal. One simple note on your phone. Each time you almost say sorry, you write 3 things. What happened? What you almost apologized for, and what you said instead. That's it. Why? Because the moment you see the pattern on paper, you can't lie to yourself anymore about how often you bow. Have you ever noticed how people who rarely apologize are somehow treated as more important, more untouchable? You're about to see why. After 7 days of this, you will be shocked at how deeply your fear of disapproval has been running your mouth, your schedule, your entire life. One person or one context where this will be hardest. The boss who intimidates you, the friend who guilt trips you, the partner who sulks. That's where you start. Not where it's easy, where your old weakness usually wins. Because when you can hold your frame there, under pressure, without collapsing into sorry, that terrifies them. Trust me, this is not just about 1 week. This is a stress test for your identity. And once you feel what it's like to stay solid in the moment where you used to fold, you're ready for the next level. How to apologize strategically, like a ruler, without ever stepping back into the role of the guilty child. And then, it happens. The first real test. Not in your head, not in theory, but live. In front of people who are used to watching you break. Picture this, you're in a meeting, or at dinner, or on a call. You miss a detail. You misread a message. You make a decision that backfires. The room feels that little shift. The air tightens. Everyone who knows your old behavior leans in, waiting for the show. They expect the over-explaining. They expect the nervous laugh. They expect the automatic sorry. But this time, you don't give it to them. You pause. You breathe. You let the silence sit there for a second longer than is comfortable. You don't rush to fill it with guilt. You don't rush to perform weakness. You just let your mind catch up to the moment, instead of letting your emotions drag you by the throat. Here's the harsh reality. Most people have never seen that before. They've seen people explode. They've seen people crumble. They rarely see someone stay calm, admit reality, and move straight into control. You say that one's on me. Here's what we're doing next. No drama, no self-attack, just ownership and direction. Pay attention to what happens in their eyes when you do that. First, confusion. They were ready to comfort you, or to attack you, or to enjoy the spectacle. Now they have nothing to grab. Then, recalculation. You can almost see the mental math. Wait, guilt doesn't hook them anymore? I can't drag them into a shame spiral? Finally, a new awareness. You're not terrified of being wrong. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People don't lose power over you when you become perfect. They lose power when your mistakes stop being leverage. When you stop turning every misstep into a full confession scene, their favorite weapon slips out of their hand. They can point out a flaw, but they can't make you bleed for it. You think you need a big speech about confidence. You think you need the right mantra, the right quote, the right morning routine. But this moment is louder than any speech. This is your identity under attack, in public, and you stay intact. You don't defend your worth. You don't beg for respect. You demonstrate, with your behavior, that your value is not hanging from their approval like a puppet on a string. Have you ever noticed how people fear what they can't easily move? They can handle your anger because they know how to trigger it. They can handle your tears because they know how to calm you down and feel superior. But when you stand there, wrong and unshaken, that terrifies them. They're forced to confront a new reality. If I can't use guilt, what do I use? Trust me, this is the turning point. This is where you stop being emotionally blackmailable. But you're not done. Holding this new presence once is impressive. Holding it every time, under pressure, when the stakes are higher and the attacks get smarter, that's a different level of power. In the next sections, we're going to lock this in. How do you keep this composure when the mistake is bigger, public, or weaponized against you? How do you avoid slipping back into old habits the moment someone raises their voice or threatens your reputation? Stay with me, because this is where we turn no apology from a moment into a mindset. So how do you make that mindset automatic, not fragile? How do you stop depending on willpower and start running this response on instinct, even when your heart rate spikes and your reputation feels like it's on the line? Here's the harsh reality. Under pressure, you do not rise to your goals, you fall to your training. If you haven't pre-programmed your response to criticism and mistakes, your nervous system will default back to the oldest script it knows: panic, over-explaining, and weak apologies that hand people power over you. That's why you need pre-commitment. You decide your behavior before the emotion hits. You lock in a rule: when I'm called out, I do not babble, I do not confess my soul, I do not beg for forgiveness. I pause. I get specific. I restate the standard. I name the next step. That's it. No improvisation. No drama. Just a protocol. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. People with power don't see how they feel in the moment. They script themselves. A Machiavellian ruler in The Prince doesn't wait to discover his character during a crisis. He crafts the appearance of composure in advance. Because perception is a weapon. You do the same thing, just on a smaller scale, every time you choose your response before the attack comes. So you build a ritual. Morning, 2 minutes. No excuses. Picture this. You close your eyes and run a mental simulation. You imagine making a visible mistake at work, getting called out in front of people, feeling that familiar punch of shame in your chest. Then you rehearse the new pattern. You pause. You breathe. You say, calmly, "You're right. That missed the mark." The standard is X'd. Here's what happens next. No apology tour. No self-insult. Just clarity and control. You think that's trivial? Pay attention. Your brain does not distinguish strongly between imagined rehearsal and real behavior. You are literally training your nervous system not to treat being wrong as a mortal threat. You're teaching your body that silence, specifics, and standards are safe. That's how you strip the fear out of mistakes and keep your mind online when other people would be spiraling. Then at night, you close the loop. 5 minutes. No phone. You ask yourself 2 brutal questions. Where did I over-apologize today? And where did I hold my frame? You replay conversations. You notice the email where you wrote 3 sentences of unnecessary guilt. You notice the moment you stayed calm instead of defending yourself, and you adjust tomorrow's pre-commitment based on that data. Trust me, this repetition is where the transformation hides. Do this long enough and it stops being a tactic and becomes identity. You're no longer someone trying to look strong. You are the person who is predictably composed when they're wrong. That terrifies them, because they can't weaponize your guilt. And remember, Machiavellian strength is not about never slipping. It's about being so consistent in your recovery that people expect you to stabilize the room, even when you're the one under fire. But what happens when the room isn't just a meeting? It's the internet. What happens when the mistake is public, viral, and people are demanding blood, not balance? That's where we go next. When the mistake is public, the backlash is public too. And when you stop performing guilt the way people are used to, the backlash gets personal. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Not everyone is going to celebrate your new strength. Some people will straight up say, "You're arrogant now, you're cold, you're not the same anymore." You hear that? That's not analysis, that's a complaint. They're not describing your behavior, they're describing their loss of control. Here's the harsh reality: a lot of people were feeding off your guilt, your long explanations, your emotional breakdowns, your desperate need to prove you're a good person. That was their leverage. Every time you slipped, they got access to your mind. They could push, and you would overreact, overtalk, over-apologize. That was their power source. You used to send paragraphs at 2 a.m. apologizing for something small. You used to chase people who went cold on you, begging to fix it. You used to accept any accusation, because the fear of being seen as bad terrified you more than the truth itself. Now you respond with one calm line: "You're right, I messed that up. Here's what I'm doing about it." And then silence. No emotional show. No self-humiliation. That terrifies them. Have you ever noticed how the loudest you've changed always comes from the people who benefited most from the old you? The you who said sorry 10 times for one mistake. The you who tried to buy back respect with emotional performance. You think they're giving feedback. They're actually mourning the death of their favorite tool. So you need a filter. Pay attention to the difference between honest feedback and manipulative pushback. Honest feedback sounds like, "You were harsh here, you cut me off, you dismissed my point." Specific, grounded, it points to a behavior you can examine without surrendering your spine. Manipulative pushback sounds like, "You're so cold now, I can't talk to you anymore, you used to care." Vague, emotional, it attacks your identity, not your actions. Trust me, when someone jumps straight to "I can't talk to you anymore," what they really mean is, "I can't control you the way I used to." They're not leaving a relationship, they're leaving a failed strategy. And this is the cost. You cannot step into a non-controllable identity and keep every dynamic intact. You will lose certain roles: the fixer, the emotional punching bag, the public confessor. You might lose certain people too. Let them go. Power and approval rarely sit in the same chair. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. If you refuse to perform weakness on command, some people will call you the villain. Machiavelli would say, "Let them," because in the next section, we're going to tie this directly to his core warning: why appearing weak invites attacks, how public guilt becomes blood in the water, and how you can handle pressure, even viral outrage, without ever putting your throat on the table again. Here's the harsh reality. Public guilt is not innocent. It's ammunition. And Machiavelli understood that long before social media, HR departments, or cancel culture existed. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Machiavelli did not tell rulers, "Confess everything and people will love you." He said the opposite. He said it is more important to appear virtuous than to actually be virtuous. Why? Because people react to what they see, not what lives in your private conscience. You think you're being noble by exposing every flaw. They see weakness, instability, and a throne they can push over. Pay attention. In his world, when a prince publicly admitted fault, that confession didn't disappear into the air. It turned into a weapon. Rivals repeated it to the army. Priests repeated it to the people. Advisors whispered, "See, he admitted he was unfit." A single moment of public guilt could justify rebellion, blackmail, or a quiet removal from power. One apology, 10 daggers. A ruler stands before the crowd and says, "I have failed you." Sounds honest, right? In real politics, that line becomes a legal argument, a moral argument, a rallying cry. Suddenly, every ambitious person has a quote they can wave around to prove he doesn't deserve the crown. Machiavelli's warning was simple: never hand your enemies the script they will use to destroy you. Now fast forward to you. You're not a medieval prince, but you are the ruler of your own life. Your reputation is your throne. Your job, your relationships, your social circle, that is your territory. And every time you over-apologize in public, you are doing the same thing those doomed rulers did. You are giving people receipts they can pull up later to question your competence, your reliability, your emotional stability. Have you ever noticed how, after a long, dramatic apology, people look at you differently? They may say, "It's okay," but their mind files you under, not fully steady, not fully in control. Modern research backs this up. Over-apologizing shifts the focus from solving the problem to your personal inadequacy. You don't just admit a mistake, you advertise yourself as the mistake. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. This does not mean you lie. It does not mean you deny reality. Machiavelli was brutal, but he was not stupid. He knew that if a ruler never corrected anything, people would turn anyway. The strategy is this: you own what you must, but you control the frame. Short, clear, decisive. This went wrong. Here's what happens next. No theatrics. No self-humiliation. Think about a strong leader after a failed launch. They don't cry on camera. They don't say, "I'm terrible, I'm so sorry, I ruined everything." They briefly acknowledge the failure, then lay out a concrete plan and a deadline. That posture is remembered as strength, not shame. Reputation science is clear. People remember how you handled the mistake more than the mistake itself. Trust me, the same law applies in your life. You can say, "I was wrong," without stepping off your own throne. You can correct, compensate, and improve without doing a public performance of weakness. Because every time you turn your guilt into a show, you are soaring at the legs of your own chair. In the next section, we're going to go even deeper into that strategy, how to respond when you're under fire so you keep your power, keep your respect, and never again hand people the knife they'll use on your reputation. So here's what you have to understand next. People don't archive your mistakes like a courtroom transcript. They don't sit there replaying every detail. They remember the feeling of watching you handle it. Calm or chaotic. Leader or victim. Power or weakness. Reputation science is brutal about this. When something goes wrong, people's memory locks onto your tone, your posture, your behavior under pressure, not the technical error, not the tiny detail, the image, the vibe. The story they tell later is never, "He miscalculated by 7%. It's, "He didn't flinch. He took control." Or, "She fell apart. She wouldn't stop apologizing." Have you ever noticed how two people can make the same mistake but only one walks away with more respect? Same failure, different recovery. One person spirals into self-blame, over-explaining, begging for forgiveness. The other acknowledges it once, sets a clear correction, and moves. That second person becomes the one who doesn't panic. That label sticks to them for years. A CEO's product launch fails. Public embarrassment. Headlines, instead of a tearful press conference, they step up, steady voice, and say, "Here's what missed. Here's the 90-day fix. Here's the next milestone, and I'll be there personally." No groveling, no emotional collapse, just direction. Fast forward a year. People don't talk about the failure. They talk about how they trust that leader in a crisis. Now picture the opposite. The chronic apologizer. Every meeting, every email, every tiny delay starts with sorry. They think they're being polite. They think they're being considerate. Here's the harsh reality. They're training people to associate them with guilt, chaos, and low status. You don't respect that person. You pity them. You walk over them. You tune them out. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. You're building one of those reputations right now. You are either becoming the person people describe as they don't panic, they fix. Or you are becoming, yeah, they mean well, but they're always apologizing. Which one do you want people whispering about when you're not in the room? This is where Machiavelli would grab you by the collar. He didn't care if a ruler was secretly flawless. He cared what people saw. He knew that public displays of guilt invite attack. When you perform your regret, you signal you're already on your knees. Predators smell that. But when you stay composed, take responsibility without self-humiliation, and act decisively, you project inevitability. You look like someone it's dangerous to bet against. So choose, consciously, the reputation you're going to build over the next year, not with speeches, with recoveries. Your next visible error is not a disaster, it's a live demonstration. Will people watch you crumble, or watch you tighten your jaw, lower your voice, and quietly correct course? Pay attention, because in the next part, we're going to script that moment in detail, exact phrases, exact body language, so the next time you fall, your recovery scares people more than your mistake ever could. So let's zoom out for a second. You've seen the pieces. Now you need the pattern. Because power doesn't come from one dramatic line, it comes from 7 quiet behaviors you repeat until people stop seeing you as prey. Behavior 1, emotional non-reactivity. You don't explode. You don't defend. You don't bleed emotion all over the floor. You stay calm, steady, unreadable. Whoever can't make you react, can't control you. Your face becomes a wall. Their fear bounces off it. Behavior 2, you frame the mistake first. You name what happened before anyone else weaponizes it. Here's what went wrong. Here's what I'm doing next. You think that makes you vulnerable, but actually it steals the narrative out of their hands. You decide the story, they're stuck reacting to you. Behavior 3, you use silence, not as awkwardness, as pressure. You say the minimum, then you shut up and let people sit in their own tension. And let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most people fear silence more than conflict. They start confessing, backtracking, filling the air, while you keep your power by keeping your mouth closed. Behavior 4, you turn errors into territory grabs. You miss a deadline, so you claim the next one and expand your role. You screw up a conversation, so you set the next meeting and define the rules. You don't retreat from the scene of the mistake, you plant a flag there. That terrifies them, because they expected shame and got expansion instead. Behavior 5, you judge yourself calmly. No self-pity, no self-destruction, just cold review. This was my fault. Here's the correction. You become your own harsh but fair ruler. Picture this, everyone is waiting for you to spiral, and you're already drafting the fix. Who looks like the adult in the room now? Behavior 6, you refuse to apologize for other people's feelings. You'll correct your action, not their emotional storm. I was wrong about X. Your reaction is yours. You stop rewarding dramatics with groveling. Here's the harsh reality. When you stop bowing to every mood swing, the manipulators lose their favorite weapon. Behavior 7, you demand specifics. No vague accusations, no fog. What exactly did I do? When? How do you want this resolved? You drag the conversation out of emotional chaos and into concrete detail, where power lives. Pay attention to the common thread. In every behavior, you protect your status while still taking responsibility. You fix things without trading your spine for approval. You don't perform guilt, you execute corrections. This is the identity shift. You're not the person who apologizes just to stay liked. You're the ruler stabilizing your domain. Machiavelli warned that perception matters more than confession, and you're finally using that. Your posture under fire speaks louder than any sorry ever will. Pattern interrupt. Right now, silently, score yourself from 1 to 10 on each behavior. Where are you a weapon, and where are you still acting like a target? Because in the next part, we're going to take your lowest scores and turn them into your most dangerous strengths. So here's where it gets real. From this point on, every time you're wrong, you're not just fixing a situation, you're voting on who you are, leader or target, ruler or prey. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. You don't have a personality in these moments, you have patterns. And every pattern is a ballot. Do you collapse, over-explain, flood people with emotion, and beg for their respect back? That's a vote for prey. Or do you stay calm, own the facts, correct course, and move on without groveling? That's a vote for power. Here's the harsh reality: you don't get to sit this one out. Neutral doesn't exist. Every apology, every correction, every mistake response is training people how to treat you. You think you're smoothing things over, but are you actually teaching them that all they have to do is poke your weakness and you'll hand over control of your mind? So answer this directly, right now. Which side are you choosing from this point forward? Not when it's easy, when it's humiliating, when you're exposed in front of people you want to impress. Are you going to react like a leader or fold like a target? Because that choice will cost you. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you some approval. Some people like you better when you're on your knees. Pay attention to that. The moment you stop performing guilt for them, some will call you cold, arrogant, heartless, good. Translation: you're not easy to control anymore, and that terrifies them. You are not here to be emotionally available for everyone's need to feel superior. You are here to become unbreakable where it counts. In your sense of self, when you inevitably slip. But don't lie to yourself and pretend you'll flip all 7 behaviors overnight. You won't. And when you fail, you'll use that as proof you can't change. So be strategic. Pick one behavior to master first. Just one. Maybe it's emotional non-reaction when someone calls you out. Maybe it's refusing to over-apologize when you miss a deadline. One behavior, on purpose, every time, until it's automatic. Picture this. You get something wrong at work. Instead of a long, shaky speech about how you feel terrible, you say, "That's on me. Here's what I'm doing in the next 30 days to fix it," and then you shut up. No self-attack, no fishing for reassurance. You just redirected the room from your weakness to your direction. Who looks like the leader now? From now on, the next time you're wrong is not a threat. It's a test. A live-fire exercise, a chance to prove to yourself that you are done being easy to read, easy to guilt, easy to control. So here's your challenge before we move on. Decide your side. Choose your one behavior. Because in the next section, I'm going to show you exactly how to drill it into your nervous system until reacting like a ruler is your default, even under fire. So you picked your behavior. Good. Now we weaponize it. Because let me tell you something uncomfortable. If you don't turn this into a system, your old reflexes will drag you straight back into weakness the second pressure hits. You don't need more motivation. You need a script, a structure, and repetition until your nervous system obeys you instead of your guilt. Here's the harsh reality. Power is built in tiny, boring moments, not dramatic speeches. One controlled response, one non-apology, one steady sentence when you would have rambled and begged. That's it. That's the brick. You stack enough of those, and suddenly people talk to you differently without knowing why. So this week, you run a 3-step Machiavellian apology system: awareness, replacement, reflection, simple, brutal, effective. Step 1, awareness. For 7 days, your main job is to catch your reflex sorry before it escapes your mouth. You think you don't apologize that much? Pay attention. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. You say sorry for asking a question. You say sorry before giving your opinion. Every one of those is a tiny bow of the head, a micro signal that your existence is an inconvenience. Your tool here is the 3-second pause. Someone pushes, complains, or looks disappointed. You do nothing. 1, 2, 3, no flinch. No nervous laugh. No fast explanation. In those 3 seconds, you ask yourself one question. Did I actually do something wrong, or do they just not like my boundary, my truth, or my emotion? Step 2, replacement. When there is a real mistake, you don't grovel, you command. Your default phrase this week is, "Here's what happens next." Product failed? That's on me. Here's what happens next. You snapped at someone? I raised my voice. Here's what happens next. Short, clean, decisive. You accept responsibility without handing over your dignity or control. When there is no real mistake, you refuse to apologize for your feelings, your needs, or your standards. Picture this. You tell a friend, "I'm not available tonight," and they act offended. Old you says, "Sorry, I just have a lot going on." New you says, "That doesn't work for me," and goes silent. That terrifies them, because they're used to your guilt doing the negotiating. To make this real, choose one battlefield for the week: work, family, or your partner. One context where you will not apologize for emotions, only for clear actions that actually violated your own standards. Everywhere else, do what you want. But in that one arena, you are strict. No emotional apologies, only behavioral ones. Then you write 2 sentences. One personal standard you will publicly hold yourself to: I keep my word on deadlines. I don't insult people in arguments, whatever matches your chosen behavior. And one boundary you will no longer apologize for: I don't answer messages after 9 p.m. I won't discuss my private life at work. I leave when conversations turn disrespectful. Put them somewhere you see every day. Step 3. Reflection. Every night, 2 minutes. No journaling marathon. No dramatic therapy session. Just ask, where did I catch myself? Where did I still leak sorry? Where did I use here's what happens next? You are training your mind like a strategist, not judging yourself like a victim. Pay attention. When you do this, what actually happens? Did they get angrier? Did they back down? Did they suddenly start respecting your boundaries because you didn't fold? I want the details. In your comment, describe the situation, the exact words you used, and how they reacted. The more specific you are, the stronger this becomes. Here's the harsh reality. When you share that story, you're not just engaging with the video, you are rehearsing your power. You are telling your nervous system, this is who I am now. And you're giving other people a script, so they stop being controlled by guilt and emotional blackmail. Have you ever noticed how one person standing firm gives everyone else permission to stop being weak? That terrifies them. Use it like a weapon. Before a tough conversation, rewatch the sections you need. The part on refusing to apologize for emotions. The part on framing the mistake first. The part on holding silence instead of babbling. Picture this. Instead of pacing around overthinking, you run this video. Lock in the lines, then walk in calm. Last thing, you know someone who apologizes like a hostage. Send them this and say, watch this before your next hard conversation. Trust me, that one move might change how they move for the next decade. So here's where this all lands. Never apologize was never about pretending you're perfect. It was never about denying reality. It was about refusing to apologize in the weak, leaking, self-shrinking way you were trained to perform. Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. Most apologies are not about repair. They're about control. You flood the room with emotion, you perform guilt, you hand people a lever over your mind and your status. You think that makes you noble, but it makes you easy to manage, easy to manipulate, easy to keep small. Here's the harsh reality: you will still be wrong sometimes. You will still mess up. Power is not about never falling. Power is about how you stand back up. Do you crawl, confessing your every flaw, begging people to still like you? Or do you stand up straight, name the mistake once, and move directly into what happens next? From now on, never apologize means this. You never apologize in a way that makes you smaller, softer, and easier to control. You separate responsibility from self-destruction. You own the impact, you adjust your behavior, but you do not bleed emotion all over the floor to prove you're sorry. The old you walks in shaking, over-explaining, oversharing, turning one mistake into a 3-hour trial of your entire personality. The new you walks in calm. You say, here's what went wrong. Here's what I'm doing about it. Then you shut up. Silence, no babbling, no begging. That shift alone changes how people read your power. So carry this frame into every room. At work, with family, in relationships. When you're wrong, you will not hide. You will not crumble, and you will not perform pain to earn forgiveness. You will be specific, you will be brief, and then you will let your actions finish the conversation. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. The world is not judging whether you fall, it's judging whether pushing you down was worth it. From now on, every time you stand back up, you make them think twice before trying it again. This is your new identity. You don't use mistakes to expose your weakness. You use them to reveal your strength. And anyone who can't handle that can lose access. Rewatch this before your next hard conversation. Then walk in calm. Own it once. And never apologize the old way again.